Huawei's relationship with North America takes a rocky turn as law enforcement agencies issue an advisory and problems arise from trying to game Mate 10 reviews on Best Buy. We're also tracking drama from HTC, Xiaomi, and Verizon. So, with a special guest on this week's show, let's also spend a little time prepping the rumors and leaks coming up for MWC. That'll be a lot more fun, methinks. We've got a lot to talk about, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 292 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Recorded February 16th at noon Pacific, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid reading dime store science fiction novels. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Mr. Jules Wong. How's it going, buddy boy?
I'm pretty good. I mean, it's a little gray out here today, but the sunshiny face that I can put on to counter this is going to be as well defined as the quality of the webcam.
Yeah, Jules, your weather notwithstanding, we've got a third face on the podcast this week.
We do.
I was just like, where are you going with this, Jules? Cloud cover? No. What's much more exciting than Jules's weather shenanigans? Joining the podcast this week, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ryne Hager from Android Police. Thank you so much for joining the show this week.
Thank you for having me. I'm about 10 feet from Jules right now, even though it looks like it's much sunnier where I am. The weather is just as bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's hilarious that you guys are saying that. We had just like a little bit of just like cloud frosting in Los Angeles over the last week, and it broke literally about 20 minutes ago, and it's completely screwing with the exposure that I set on my camera. Like, I'm darker than I should be. The background's all blowing out right now. This isn't exactly what I intended, but
you're already just standing in front of the Aurora Borealis.
Yeah, well, exactly. While I'm prepping my steamed hams. So Ryne, thank you so much. I'm embarrassed to say that I've been participating with Android Police, been a big fan. We had David Reddick on the show to talk about some stuff a couple months back. And for the longest time, I thought there were two Ryans on Android Police, and it wasn't until Jules sent me an email that I even bothered to recognize that your name is more closely resembles a river, not like Ryan Gosling. So
yeah, I get that a lot, and I tend to just respond to both, which, since we also have a Ryan at Android Police, means there's a little bit of a mix-up sometimes, but it works.
Well, I'm glad I was able to correct that in my brain and hopefully save you just one person's worth of agony for actually identifying you as you properly should be. So
I've learned that the one thing that you can do to differentiate between the two is just talk about linen for a little bit, and then
it's true.
Yeah,
that's how you tell the difference between me and Ryan. We're pretty much identical otherwise, but linen brings out the differences.
Good to know. I endeavor our listeners to consider approaching you with discussions on tabletop fabrics. And we'll see how that.
And speaking of our listeners, we want you to participate while we're talking about other things other than linen or any of our personal endeavors here. We want you to chime in with Twitter here, YouTube chats as we go along. Here it might not be the best way to engage with us, as they're coming in pretty fast. So hashtag PN Weekly on Twitter would be the best idea to go with right now. And if you can't make it to our show, if you're listening to this after the fact, send us an email, podcast@pocketnow.com, and we will happily respond to your questions and concerns and comments after, let's say a couple of weeks, because we got the MWC coming up, and we have a mailbag episode afterwards, which would be between the end of February and the beginning of March. So
would be ideal. And then also for those of you joining the show live, we're already seeing some chatter on that PN Weekly hashtag. Mr. Andrew Sislak saying shout outs to other regular listeners at Fat Produce, at Rena Chan, people already chatting about some of the topics we have coming up this week. So, meet us up on Twitter, and throughout the week, if you want to shoot us a tweet using that PN Weekly hashtag, that's a lot easier for us to track than real-time instant message style communications on the YouTubes and the other platforms.
Hardcore, real-time, powerful, in-your-face, live as we speak. The confronting images.
Those were all words. Yes.
Yes.
All right, let's jump in. all of the news that's the top news stories from Pocketnow this week.
Fit to podcast, yeah, for the week of February 12th. This is all the news that is fit to podcast, and we begin with the U.S. government and a meeting of the Senate Intelligence Committee with some of the top intelligence heads of the nation, 6 of them, including the FBI's Christopher Wray, speaking to the concerns of Chinese cyber threats and the fact that Huawei and ZTE are apparently they wouldn't recommend using a handset from them. So this is coming as Huawei and ZTE are building their U.S. Consumer relationships. So this will be interesting to see going forward, especially as the Mate 10 Pro is being blocked off by carriers. We'll have to see how that goes along. And speaking of Mate 10 Pro, got that contest from Facebook that was happening there. Apparently, there was some sort of a contest to recruit beta users for the hardware, and the main mechanism of entry was putting down a review on the Best Buy review page for the product, which was only in pre-orders, by the way. And there's a whole bunch of terms of use that would be violated in that. And apparently the whole snafu is being addressed by Huawei right now, saying that they were confused, that there was an internal confusion, that this was just there was supposed to be a second campaign for current beta users that they were supposed to give feedback on the Best Buy page. But apparently there was some converging going on. We'll have to get into that in just a little bit. HTC's smartphone business president, Xiaolin Chang, has resigned. Just another one in the many resignations that have come along over the years. Seems like last year it was Scott Croyle that got off the bandwagon after the HTC 10. And now it's the smartphone business president getting off here. And this is before any potential U12 that might be coming along. So definitely not a good sign, even though there was some sort of a positive encouragement from Google and that $1.1 billion labor deal going on. We'll have to look into that a little bit further. Verizon has announced that it will be SIM locking phones again after a decade or so of agreeing to not selling any or doing anything with SIM locking. The requirement was because of agreement it signed with the FCC to acquire 700 megahertz frequencies for licensing. And now they're saying that we're going to do this for theft and fraud reasons to protect customers from that. They say that the change does not impact the spirit of that agreement, and as it is designed to deter theft by those who engage in identity theft or other fraud. We'll get into the debate about that in just a little bit. Apple's HomePod is not really going along with other products. Typically, you see very high product margins on these products, including the iPhone 10, which is kind of an achievement within its own self, I guess you could say. But when you're considering that Apple is selling the HomePod for $349, and that you see the price to build according to source here, $216. It's a comparatively modest margin to have, where typically it'd be 60-something%. This is more closer to 40%. So definitely a little out of line in terms of the usual habits of Apple. The Google Pixelbook now has a sleeve to go along with it, and the Google Store is selling it for $100. Xiaomi has deleted a Twitter poll that is really stirring things up here. I believe they've done 1 or 2 of these beforehand, but they've done this on Twitter, and they're polling users on which.
Did we just lose Jules? I mean, the last story in a nutshell, Xiaomi. You know what, Ryne? Let's start right there. You run a major smartphone manufacturing company. You put out a poll. Why do you put out a poll? I feel most people put out polls because they're confident they know what the results are going to be.
I'm not sure why they put out that poll, because they had to have known that people were not going to vote for.
No, it was. I think it was by the end of it, it was like 57-43 in terms of Android One to MIUI, and some similar kind of thing going on in the previous poll. So when you consider the wider audience of Twitter, there's some American global audience going with that, and how the enthusiast market tends to gravitate towards Xiaomi. Anyways, this was not really a good combination, and even with like an informed poll where they would do it just strictly for the Chinese market or something like that, I'm not sure as to whether that would provide better results or more meaningful results at the very least.
Now, Ryne, as we're kind of like digging into stories like this, we're going to be talking a lot about Huawei here in just a bit, kind of moving back up the news chain that we just went through all the headlines. Would your experiences at Android Police kind of mirror some of the discussion that we've had on Pocketnow, where it seems like most of the enthusiasts, the people that really join this conversation, we're all pretty well satisfied with the current state of Android. I mean, picking up a Pixel doesn't feel like the old Nexus days where there was a lot of missing functionality from third-party skins.
Yeah, people definitely like. I was just remarking on the other day. There's not really as much of a feature gap anymore. People used to need to root and ROM and to do things like that to add in the features they wanted. Now there are enough other workarounds for pretty much anything you could desire. There's not really, in my opinion anyway, a whole lot that's lacking right now in Android. Although some of the supplementary projects like Android Wear could use a little work.
A lot of help. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Android Wear always needs to work.
Yeah.
Well, and it definitely, I think it speaks to Google's confidence in their various projects right now. Like we're seeing them pushing the boundaries on different aspects of Android design. I think we're watching them kind of coast on Android Wear, but as we get back to their relationship with individual manufacturers, do you think that this is increasingly going to be the differentiator between the various camps? I mean, there are Xiaomi fans, just like there are Samsung fans, just like there are LG fans, just like there are Pixel fans. Do you think that people are fans of a manufacturer because of these software improvements or despite?
I don't know. I will qualify whatever I say with not all opinions are valid. But I don't think that I think that there are genuinely some people who like some of the features that are added by ROMs. I know that there are a lot of people who are really into Samsung's modifications over the last couple of years and that swear by whatever they're calling it now. It's not TouchWiz anymore, is it?
Samsung Experience.
Yeah, the UI experience.
Yeah, but I think that if most people get the chance to try a wider variety and flavor of the various builds, that they'll probably end up liking the simpler ones, the non-MIUIs, the closer to stock. Really, I think the better it is in terms of usability, because most of the modifications that get put on top of it really don't add a whole lot in terms of usability. They're just differentiation for differentiation's sake.
Well, and especially when we're looking at an outlet like Xiaomi, where for the longest time it seemed like there was a concerted push to try and draw Android closer to iOS style functionality.
Yeah, they in terms of appearance and a lot of the weird behavior in it, they try to clone a lot of that functionality, and I'm not a fan. I think it's terrible. But
so I want to kind of move up from there, because again, I just think it's funny that the number of sort of PR missteps that we saw from numerous companies this week. I mean, in and out of the tech space, but like polling the Twitter poll, like the sour grapes of I'm just gonna take my ball and go home. It was like the lighthearted version of what we're gonna be getting into with some of these other issues.
It's like the Tim Cook of like taking the Super Bowl picture and then deleting it because it was not the best.
The iPhone camera is supposed to be so good, and now suddenly we have to talk about the skill of the photographer too. No, I do want to unravel a little bit, and Ryne, get your thoughts on this move by Verizon. I'm a little confused as to why this was the right time. The cynic in me is really wanting to point to the current relationship between major telecom companies, this concerted effort to remove consumers' right to repair, and the telecommunications relationship with regulatory agencies at the time. I'm a little distrustful, and I feel like I'm going to be kind of popping on my tinfoil hat a lot during this broadcast. I'm a little distrustful of the motives behind relocking phones on the platform. Do you really feel that this is the best move forward for trying to reduce smartphone theft and fraud?
I don't necessarily know that locking devices is going to reduce smartphone theft and fraud. It might, but I don't believe that for a second that that's actually the explanation for what is going on, because they're definitely just taking advantage of the fact that right now the FCC is being managed by someone who's friendly enough not to try to enforce the regulation that was previously imposed upon them when they purchased, what was it, the 700 megahertz blocks?
Exactly.
Yeah. I know David was ranting about that in our coverage, and he's entirely right. He's absolutely correct.
Because I think it's just another example of exactly what you were saying, Ryan. It's another example of the difference between tech coverage and sort of tech lifestyle. You know, I'm really excited that Geek has won the general sort of lifestyle discussion. Smartphones are ubiquitous. You know, we win, but because of that, it also feels like we don't always have the most in-depth or consumer appropriate discussions on these types of on these types of stories. So, I don't know, Ryan. Moving right along as we check out the landscape on different manufacturers and the companies that people seem to be excited about releasing new products. Where's HTC's current dilemma with presidents resigning fitting into that? It's not leaving me with a lot of confidence for the brand moving forward as a premium outlet for smartphones.
Well, they did just sell a hardware division to Google, right? So how much is left?
Well, so someone. Like, I'm wearing tinfoil hat a lot for these stories this week. Someone accused me of trying to create a kind of narrative around that buyout. Like, my theory was you piecemeal HTC, you move some of the most important divisions over to Google, the Vive becomes its own thing, and within 2 years, the HTC brand is just licensed out on low-cost and mid-range hardware, and the spirit of HTC will live on in the Pixel. And someone told me, oh, no, you're wrong. This is the move is predicated on dividing these resources, but there's always going to be a high-end HTC, blah, 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 blah. To me, seeing the revolving door of presidents and CEOs and CTOs and CFOs and the different people running the top of this organization speaks to me that we're probably not looking at an HTC that's long for this world in a way that we understand it today.
We entertained the same thought as well in a discussion on the Android Police podcast, I think 2 weeks ago, they're splitting off all of the assets that are worth anything. They sold the hardware division to Google. I think they still have at least one hardware division left. As you said, the Vive is being spun off into its own like separate thing. So what's left? Like I don't think it's their intention to do any of what you just described, but I would not be at all surprised to see that happen, because I think that if they don't maintain profitability with what they've got left, they'll see more of the company's departments and assets being split off and sold piecemeal until all that's left is the name. And I'm not hopeful.
And this also avoids some of the ire that we saw when Google just outright acquired Motorola. Right. So now I feel like there's also like an imaging war that's happening, like a PR battle that happens. What are the optics on a move like this? If Google had just reached out, snatched up HTC in its entirety, that puts pressure on other manufacturers.
They were angry enough about Motorola when that happened. Yeah,
exactly. And so now I kind of feel like this lets everyone off the hook. HTC's sort of allowed to fail on its own terms while they have plenty of time in the market to look at what needs to be acquired, what resources need to be divided, what needs to be shipped off to another, what debts and assets need to be reconciled. And we can be pretty confident that the team that was at HTC before they went to Google probably had about 2 phones in the pipeline. You know, I would expect there'd be a U12 and probably a U13. You know, there were already designs on manufacturing that hardware. That's why I kind of say within the next 2 to 3 years, I seriously doubt HTC is going to resemble what it did, a year ago.
Yeah, The pipeline is, I think the hardware development pipeline is usually at least 12 months, usually like 12 to 18. So we're definitely going to see 1 to 2 more phones out of. I'm curious to see if any of that's going to come along with the purchase of the hardware division that Google got. If the next Pixels are going to be based on some of these HTC phones that might have been in the pipe, if any of that came with the acquisition of the.
Do you think we'll still see some of that synergy just because of the team having made that transition, or do you think that Google will start to exert more of its own influence over the design process? Like where we were, was it the HTC U11 Plus being the Pixel XL that we didn't get because of LG manufacturing that phone, or do you think we'll see a starker divide for Pixel 3?
I don't even know. The Pixel 2 situation, because there was the canceled Walleye. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, the Walleye. Yeah, that was the original XL that they were.
Yeah. And then they ended up going with the LG phone instead. But I don't, I don't really know. I don't know how it's gonna. Who knows? Maybe the purchase of the hardware division is going to end up being something totally unrelated, and they're going to use this to manufacture more of like the other goods they're doing, the Google Clips or the
good point.
Assistant speakers. It could, market. Yeah, it could be totally unrelated. Until we see a phone come out, until we find out who the manufacturer is, there's no way to know. But I bet that it's pointing towards the next Pixel, if not this next one, because maybe it was far enough down the pipe. Maybe they have LG already picked for the next bit of hardware. Then definitely the one after.
Because I think that was probably one of the fairest criticisms of Google's launch this year, was having hardware discrepancies and like sort of having different problems for each tier of Pixel, like microphone issues versus screen problems versus like paint chipping, like on some of the durability of these phones.
Not to mention the screen on the XL.
Well, exactly. And so I think one of the surest ways to sort of reconcile some of those QA problems would be to get manufacturing all under one roof.
Hopefully so. I think that either way, there's still going to be AMOLED is a problem. Where are they going to source the panels from? There's 2 companies that make them. You got LG, you got Samsung. LG makes bad ones. Samsung makes good ones, but Samsung...
LG doesn't make bad OLEDs. They make OLEDs that resemble screens from like 2 generations ago.
Well, I mean, in the contemporary landscape, I don't think that it's like the screen on the 2XL. I don't know what was going on with that. It's definitely a different bin than what the V30 got, because you can see the differences in uniformity, and like it's the one on the Pixel 2 XL looks a lot better to me. But it's okay, it's fine, it's acceptable, but it's nothing compared to the screen on the Note 8. Like Samsung's in a whole other world, man.
I think there's definitely something to be said for Samsung's acumen there, right?
Yeah,
they put money on OLED with the first generation Galaxy S. So in terms of refinement, change over time, we've only seen LG dabble. Right? Yeah, we saw them dabble with the Flex, then they kind of left it for a while, went back to LCDs, then they came back, and now we need to see whether or not they can, in earnest, iterate, evolve, and improve. But that's not to say that we haven't seen other challenges. Like it's kind of a tricky question, begging and borrowing the different pieces between like a V30 and a Note 8. Because I would have to make a choice between a ruddier display from Samsung this year, where I felt like the Galaxy S7 was a noticeably more color accurate display, especially in terms of white balance. And that's something I'm looking at dead on, versus a blue color shift and more gradation in gray tones on the V30, right? So when I'm looking at my phone off axis, the LG V30 is definitely not as nice. But when I'm looking on axis, my whites are super red on Samsung's displays this year. So I kind of feel like OLED in general is being stretched to its limits. And we're noticing compromises when we were in like Galaxy S6 territory. We didn't notice those compromises, one, because OLED was still a more unique aspect of Samsung phones. But Samsung also, I think, could manage the supply chain better. They didn't have to deal with any compromises, because any screen that was performing below like the most supreme top tier level of performance could just be excised from the market. Now they have so many different things that they need to supply for, that I think we're noticing across the board OLED production is being sort of hammered by this demand.
Yeah.
Well, at least, the good thing is that, good relatively speaking, is that if it's affecting across the board, there's no favoritism in terms of what yields people get and what other kinds of it's all pretty much the same unless you go for a different supplier altogether. Now, Xiaomi did experiment with Chinese manufacturer when it was doing the Redmi 2 or 4. One of those things, BOE was one of them, and like there was so much talk about them being like a very affordable device at like the $200 mark with an OLED display. And I'm not sure if we've ever actually seen a unit, or if Weibo has seen a unit talking about that, because at some point they transitioned over to an LCD. I'm not even sure if they produced an OLED unit at all. So,
well, and who's supplying OLEDs for like Oppo and Huawei? Is that Samsung too?
I believe that's Samsung.
Yeah,
that's with the 2x1 full HD. That's a Samsung panel.
Almost assuredly, they're pretty much other than LG, they're kind of like monopolizing the whole market. Like
95%. Yeah, 95% of the market.
Good that LG is moving into it, but it'll be a while until they're actually competitive.
Yeah. I want to give them to Gen. I think that's what it's going to take to iterate, because it's not whether or not they can make the panel. It's LG's, I think, biggest issue is QA. The consistency of what they can manufacture and put out there, I think is probably their biggest issue.
I mean, all this money that Apple and Google are putting into LG, it's not for nothing. They have to show something for it.
Yeah, there should be a return with all the money that they're spending on research.
Well, but I mean, like, that's also what's kind of interesting is with LG's dabbling and the fact that they kind of built a reputation for POLED in wearables.
Yeah, that's true. They do have the smaller.
It's not that they were absent. I mean, if you look at the screen on a Flex 2 versus the V30, we do see progress, especially at the pixel density that that LG was able to ramp up on. That, I mean, they definitely have some ways to go, but I kind of feel it's like we didn't see them in a vacuum just fail. We've seen them iterate and improve. It's just we haven't seen the constant,
Samsung's been working on it for 8 years. Yeah,
right. It's like the machine of progress that Samsung has demonstrated over all this time. Let's get into this. We were talking about HTC.
Topic, sorry.
No. This is great. This is exactly the kind of tangent I wanted us to get into. To get us back on though, the biggest story. I was on set at Newegg, and people were asking me about Huawei and what's going on with sort of the federal law enforcement agencies getting involved in this discussion. Ryne, I want to kick right off into this advisory, and from my own personal attempts at trying to track this story and trying to dig up sources and seeing who's actually commenting on this. How concerned do you think consumers should be? And do you think we'll ever see a state law enforcement agency deliver the kind of evidence to back up some of the concerns that they're currently disclosing right now?
Well, a good comparison that would kind of answer both questions is that look at OnePlus. So OnePlus had a couple of recent security and privacy snafus, right?
Significant snafu.
Yeah, and each time they happen, they get called out like immediately for it. People notice it. This isn't the sort of stuff that it sneaks by. And if a relatively tiny OEM, not quite startup like OnePlus is able to not get away with something like this, there's no way that Huawei is doing any of the stuff like they're being accused of, because someone would have noticed. People digging through, doing packet inspection would have seen things being sent by the handset. It's not happening. I think that it's it's hyperbole. And to that extent, I don't think consumers really need to worry. And I don't think that there's going to be any evidence from any of the agencies that have leveled their not quite accusations against either of the companies, because if there were any evidence, smarter people than them would have found it.
Right. Well, I'm really glad you brought up OnePlus, because my examples in just sort of speaking casually, like for other just tech enthusiasts, OnePlus, and then also when we were going through some of those issues with the spyware that was being preloaded on Lenovo laptops, for example, it didn't take long for the market to discover that abuse of user data.
Yeah.
Like we moved pretty quickly from putting out notices to discussing this in public for it to make the news. Why is it that you feel, because again, I mean, we don't have any proper, I mean, I would be more than happy to sort of change my position on this if the FBI or the CIA or the NSA could point to some kind of evidence in the behavior of these products in the market abusing user data. As soon as I can see some information, I will be on board the consumer protection stance on this. Why do you feel that ZTE and Huawei were targeted as opposed to a company like OnePlus, whose sort of quiet parent organization is also a humongous smartphone manufacturer? It's not like we should let Oppo off the hook for one of the tinier sort of offshoot brands that utilizes their manufacturing.
I don't really know. I mean, it'd be conjecture either way. I couldn't say, but it could be because
to like wildly speculate.
Can I take Ryan's place on this, man? Because I think I have a larger idea of what the overall arching theme is. Because
all right, here we go. It's Jules. So we're gonna go into like sci-fi territory,
deep state, whatever the heck. But like this was indicated. Yeah, but this was indicated back in the 5G nationalization report that was released or leaked out actually by a National Security Council member, and it talked really about the need or the desire to localize, domesticate all the telecom equipment that would be needed for that network to protect against one of the largest growing threats in cybersecurity, and that is the Chinese government. They've been doing a lot of suppression in their regions, a lot of information suppression, a lot of that kind of thing going on. And Huawei and ZTE are the two biggest telecom equipment providers in this industry. Now, whether that relates to their consumer side business is up for debate. We're still trying to snoop that out. But this has been found in 2012 investigations where ZTE was violating trade sanctions by providing to Iranian carriers, Iranian suppliers, and also Huawei. I've been trying to dig into the 2012 case against them in that concern, but the general case is that telecom equipment was relaying data back to servers back in China or something like that. And with the overall concern that Huawei was founded by a former People's Liberation Army member that has been growing in terms of their cyber security digital operations going to that. There's always this thread that these intelligence agencies can draw in terms of ratcheting up more surveillance, more protective, more defensive measures against China or whatnot. So it's not just it's a very complicated situation, but I understand why this kind of conclusion is being drawn here.
Well, I think, because I agree with you. I think the reason why Oppo isn't under scrutiny is because Oppo hasn't been trying to make significant inroads in 5G telecommunications backhaul and equipment in North America, whereas we've seen Huawei and ZTE, like they have consumer sides of their business, but their main bread and butter is like actually stringing the towers together to get people connected to these networks and services. I just find it interesting. And Ryan, do you think that again, because we're just devolving into wild speculation here. Like, I don't think any of us will ever get proper disclosure or evidence to back up these assertions, and it's why the whole inside of this hat is lined with tinfoil this week,
as it should be.
As it should be. It should be every week, but this week felt appropriately prescient for me to keep up with the tinfoil attire.
No, you should sous vide your head.
Jules, I want to yes and you so bad there, and I kind of just want to get back to the topic at hand. Doesn't this start to feel maybe a little overly punitive when we're looking at the divisions between a consumer side, a consumer-facing aspect of a business, and then what that represents for the larger overall telecommunication side of that same brand label?
I don't know I think that it would be difficult for them to impose restrictions in terms of, well, you can compete in this business, but not that business. That's a level of control that we haven't quite ever pushed, to my knowledge, in terms of allowing or not allowing companies to only operate within specific areas. You can do telecommunications, but you can't do handsets, or I don't know.
Well, that's actually kind of, I mean, and again, I'm kind of glad you phrased it that way, because doesn't that illustrate part of this, where the threat of a Huawei getting any kind of toehold in the United States might make some kind of distribution or sales channel or tech deal even just a little bit easier if they're able to operate with the backing of a major U.S. carrier.
Well, I mean, ZTE
the fear of this relationship from a government perspective, again, wild speculation, and we have no disclosure or evidence to back this up, is if Huawei is in talks with AT&T, even just for selling a phone in AT&T stores, doesn't that make it easier for them to build a relationship where they could become a primary supplier of AT&T's future communications gear?
That's certainly possible. But look at ZTE. ZTE provides a ton of carrier-locked, super cheap handsets right now. And I don't know if that's happened as a result of that. Like, them selling these $50 and $80, $100 phones that are free on contract to, I don't know, Verizon, Sprint, whoever buys these, whatever networks carry the low-end ZTE handsets, doesn't seem to have given them any inroads in telecom for those companies. So I don't know.
And we look on the flip side of things. I mean, Blue, American-based kind of phone rebadging company that gets its software, its firmware vended from a Chinese supplier that, you know, they didn't take out the data collection features that they had, you know, have for standard for Chinese phones. Like, that's why isn't that being brought up as a more of a concern in the short term, at the very least? Because I mean, I feel like that would be more prescient.
No, I agree. I think that's why there has been some kind of confusion, or I mean, it just leaves you with a sense of like, why now and why these two? If they're offering this kind of an advisory, calling out two companies, and the two companies that are also going to be most responsible for building 5G networks around the world, opposite Qualcomm. I mean, some of their strongest competitors there. When we have other examples of other manufacturers that have had problems, and yet we've never seen a law enforcement advisory against
OnePlus phones,
or Blue or Vivo or any of these other unlocked supplied phones. It's something that, again, I doubt we'll ever get some kind of clear disclosure as to why now and why this, but it's going to fuel plenty of speculation and a lot of distrust of the very agencies making this advisory.
Yeah, I've got a good yarn here from
walk away and shrug, but you know, there's sort of a general air of distrust happening right now with some of these outlets.
That's certainly the political climate.
Yeah, and to that point, got a good yarn here from Renata Laporte on Twitter with the hashtag PN Weekly. Let's go straight to the point. The Chinese government isn't a saint, neither is Huawei. We know that the Chinese government has a strict control of the digital lives of its citizens. This control is made possible by companies like ZTE, Xiaomi, Huawei, but also companies like Apple who comply with the local rules to have their digital services available in China. And to be honest, the situation isn't different in the United States or Europe. The biggest difference is that authoritarian countries aren't secret about it, while the government of the free world spy on us, either in secrecy or with Homeland Security as an excuse. But do we really think that Huawei or the Chinese government even will be stupid enough to allow or require any kind of backdoor on enterprise and consumer products, only for it to be discovered, for the whole world to lose its trust on the brand? Money comes before everything else, and the Chinese government knows the amount of money that Huawei, ZTE, and others make. Besides Huawei can be considered a national pride symbol, like Samsung is for South Korea. Which, you know, it's interesting to see how China, because at this point China is well into its progression of mixing capitalistic facets into their economy, where they're still sharing a whole bunch of, you know, a lot of the communistic socialist kind of structures there. But there's more of concern now more than ever in terms of the government. We've recently seen President Xi Jinping kind of address this and, you know, continuing on in his reign, whereas, you know, other times other presidents have just, you know, faded away, room for a successor to change, give a little fresh breath of things. Whereas, well, there's no clear successor yet, and it's doubtful that that there might be one in the next 5 or 10 years. So now there's starting to be a cult more towards Xi and his ideas, and some of them involve more protectionism for China and more kind of the spreading of Chinese ideals.
Well, and I think we're seeing a number of markets sort of throw up some walls and barriers. Just the international trading climate right now, I think, has been strained by recent political events. One of the best like cynic responses that I saw on the Reddit post for this story, though, was someone writing, and I honestly couldn't tell if they were trying to make a joke or not. You know, you get into like that Poe's law of how much distrust do we have for, government agencies. And it was someone saying, well, because Huawei uses high silicon Kirin chipsets, the CIA probably had a harder time building in backdoors. And the replies to that comment were split like 50-50 between people laughing like, oh, haha, that's really funny. And then like, yeah, because the NSA is doing all this stuff and like, chemtrails. Wow, this is awesome. I love that this was like someone immediately went to, the law enforcement is offering an advisory against Huawei because they're too difficult to spy on.
No, I'm telling you, the Chinese are turning the frogs gay. All right, I caught you off the water. You almost had a spit take.
And later, we'll our sponsor is not selling disaster buckets of food that you can also turn into furniture. Before we get to our sponsor, and I apologize to the outlet sponsoring our podcast. I did also just want to lightly touch on this because in light of this political news, losing a fight badly and trying to get Huawei phones into U.S. carriers, law enforcement issuing an advisory against the security of these devices. It's just the wrong time to be entertaining shenanigan review comment trickery on trying to encourage people to buy your phones. This Best Buy problem was a bad look for Huawei. I can't imagine anyone being able to properly justify that, and it instantly creates sort of an air of ill will around the brand.
Yeah, it definitely didn't make any sense. Like, what was the justification that they had two different marketing operations happening simultaneously, and wires got crossed somewhere, and they asked people from one promotion to participate in another. Sorry for my cat. Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine that they were doing it intentionally, but maybe.
Well, but I mean, we've seen other companies like coming back to other manufacturers that have been trying to crack North America. It's a really tricky market. 85% of phone sales are between Samsung and Apple. It's very mature market, but there's money here, so you want to try and make some of that cash off of North American consumers, especially for their penchant for buying premium, really high quality devices. I look at like the old ad shenanigans that OnePlus went through, and how much they've grown up in terms of their branding and their advertising and their outreach, and it kind of feels like Huawei is making some of those rookie mistakes in this market. Even if this was a completely innocuous mistake between two different divisions of Huawei PR, that's kind of a rookie mistake to let something get that far into actual public disclosure for a public community. That's going to come back around. And it was, if I'm looking at the actual, posts that Huawei produced that people screenshotted, it looked like this was by design. It didn't look like, oh, hey, beta testers, make sure you get out there and do this. And, instead it looked like they were actually trying to game Best Buy's review system.
And, I'll be fair to Huawei in this aspect. Best Buy shouldn't be putting out a review system for a product in pre-sales. There should be no room for beta testers elsewhere or product users elsewhere to be able to comment on this. No, this should be a completely isolated experience, given that SKUs mean all the difference in terms of what features get used and other sorts of things. Yeah.
I agree with you if companies like Huawei, and this is also something that I think we shared as a criticism of LG, if they had a cohesive launch strategy. You know, I think if I were Best Buy, I would have a really hard time trying to say, well, this is a phone that's been out in the international market for months. We want to sell stuff. You know, Best Buy has an obligation to their shareholders to try and maximize profits on products sold, and they're going to be buying pallets of these phones. They're going to want them to move, and they know that there's an international community of people that have already been using this device. I think it would be financially irresponsible of them to hold off on link generation, SEO, and the type of sort of free advertising that comes with the smartphone community to say, you can't review this device because we're not technically selling it yet, even though we know there are tons of people out there that have had positive and negative experiences with this product.
Kind of just getting around the issue here of the media, fake news and fake reviews and all that stuff, I guess.
Well, I mean, you know, unfortunately, I don't know that there is a good solution. I just don't think we should task Best Buy. You know, like, I don't think we should task a retailer with trying to unravel that problem in the greater context of like social media and algorithm-based news. Yeah, I think, you know, they were taken advantage of. I think that's about as far as we could go. The more we make Best Buy make users jump through hoops to justify the content that they try and produce on Best Buy's site, it's more to the detriment of consumers than it would be to their protection. IMO.
Well, I mean, they could have review verifications like Amazon does, where, you know, they make sure you actually bought the product. But in this case, it wouldn't make any difference because nobody's received it yet, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. No one has been able to receive it from Best Buy. It has been available in the international community.
Yeah.
So how do you verify? I mean, like,
you can't.
I mean, like, you need to send us your ESN before we let you post a review.
We got to verify your IMEI matches one on this list. It's cool. Don't worry about it.
It's good. It's good. And just, you know, give us all your SIM card data and your
text messages,
biometric security, and then we'll know that you really do own this thing.
The only way that you would know is like a receipt tracking number, at least, so you can just put that in. But
that's only generated from Best Buy sales, and I think Best Buy other people will review it too.
I mean, I don't know how to feel in terms of just having that cross contamination or cross pollination of the
so far reviews. They don't seem to care.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they pull all of the user generated reviews? I
think they
axed all those, but that's also still a part and parcel is Best Buy. In a way, they are a content producer on every product that they sell. And so, you know, the site is the Mate 10 product page on Best Buy's website still links to numerous reviews from other outlets. So there was, like, I guess that could be their first wave verification. If you can't buy it in the United States, maybe you just link to Android Police and Pocketnow.
That seems like a whole lot of work to do for, I mean, I don't think it's unrealistic of them to have just, if people are purchasing internationally, to allow them to submit reviews ahead of time. But I don't know if there's no way.
I was trying to set us up, man. Like, you could be better than all the other little people or something like that.
Okay. Next time I'll go for the bait. I'm sorry.
I was like, how can I turn Best Buy into Rotten Tomatoes or something? You know, critic score and user score.
That'd be funny.
Oh, man.
I think something like that is probably going to be coming soon.
Doesn't The Verge do that on their reviews? Someone does. Engadget?
Well, I mean, we also do user scores. Like, if you go to one of our phone reviews, you can also click, you know, like number scores, I think.
Yeah, but they also aggregate them from other outlets, don't they? Or I can't remember.
Oh, that I don't know. Yeah, we haven't started collecting other sites' review scores. It's just everyone has like a different ranking system. Like, I think we've got a 10-point decimal, you know, so you can have like a score that, you know, the build quality on this phone is a 7.352. I don't know how well that would jive with, like, you know, a 5-point score or a thumb up, thumb down, something like that. So we still have a ways to go to sort. What is a you know, a 7 on The Verge versus, you know, a 3 cows on a Pocketnow versus
let's not get the DxO mark.
Android Police.
Let's not get into DxO, Mark, where its undefined scale can go past 100 without having told people about that. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's not a good look either. I mean, the thing is, every individual site I think can be internally consistent. I think DxO is phenomenally consistent in how they rank scores. I think their arrival at a final number score for their cameras does a disservice to the conversation.
A little bit. Yeah, it's kind of arbitrary.
Yeah, because one phone that scores a 90 might still not be the right fit for you versus a phone that scores like an 83, depending on
yeah, because one absolute doesn't tell you everything about the entire performance spectrum of it. You got to look at the individuals. That's why we do review categories. When you look at something, we don't just say, "Oh, the phone's a 10, you should buy it." No, we've got screen, we've got audio, we've got software. We talk about the details behind it. So
yeah, definitely. Well, talking about the details, I think we should take just a quick second to shout out our sponsor this week. What can your data tell you? With Google Cloud Platform, use machine learning at scale to build better products. Google Cloud's AI provides modern machine learning services with pre-trained models and a service to generate your own tailored models. Our platform is now available as a cloud service to bring unmatched scale and speed to your business applications. It predicts so your business can thrive. Learn more about Google Cloud Platform by visiting g.co/getcloudai.
Hooray! Look at that. We were able to get through that without any bones.
I mean, like, I can't read the intro of our podcast. Thankfully, for once, I actually pulled off a sponsor plug in one take without it being overly terrible.
No, that was a perfect read. You should just read ads all the time. There should be one.
It's like it should be my job.
One whole advertorial podcast.
You know, we should go through before we kick into the second half of this podcast and some of the other the other stories that we're leading into for MWC. I do want to get just a quick rundown on some of the tweets that we've been getting using the PN Weekly hashtag. And I want to go back. I hearted one here. Where did it go?
You had a favorite somewhere.
There are so many. So this comes from Vinny Madrox, OG Vinny Madrox. I can't actually say his Twitter name because it would kick us out of being PG-13. PN Weekly, what do you think the odds are that the new LG V30 will have the Snapdragon 845? You know, the big push for a lot of services this year, I think machine learning, AI algorithms, AR processing, stuff like that. Ryne, do you think LG is going to adopt more of an Apple-style TikTok where you put out a piece of hardware and then you just give it some internal bump a year later?
I know that's the current rumor, right? What is it? It was originally leaked as the V30S. And then yesterday or the day before, LG put out a PR about their new AI camera, whatever. And yeah, I mean, it certainly looks to be that way. We did hear the news. They made a big announcement of it, that they were going to reassess how they did things in the future and not do a yearly release cycle. So, I mean, I don't know if it's just going to be a TikTok like you're describing where they re-release the current flagship with purely software improvements, in which case I guess all the people who bought the old phone are going to be pretty pissed. Or because if the only difference is software, why isn't it just an update?
Right.
But I don't know. I guess we'll see, because I mean, we'll probably hear about it in a couple weeks here.
For me, this would be actually a really high hope on my list of things what LG needs to address and fix about themselves. Support. I wonder if they didn't spend so much time reinventing the wheel in terms of frame and design and build and individual features like camera tech every single year, if they'd be able to use some of those resources towards providing better updates, security patches, and bug fixes.
Or screens.
Separate division. Come on. No, actually, because that's really funny, is like I some of the most revolutionary work I think I've ever seen was from LG Display, and having conversations with them, like they have almost nothing to do with LG consumer hardware. Like,
wasn't there
might as well be two completely separate companies in the way that they report to the top brass at LG.
And wasn't there some news? I don't know if you guys reported on it. This was just recent, earlier today. They're doing a new phone that's going to have a white subpixel, their next flagship that's allegedly launching in June is going to have a RGBW arrangement on the screen.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I mean that could actually be kind of that could be a nice way to address some of the disparity in display quality if that gives them sort of the sub-pixel advantage over Samsung's pen tile displays. Because, you know, I think Samsung made a concerted play this year to say, why bother going more pixel dense? In fact, consumers seem to be fine with 1080p. We're not even going to tell them out of the box that that's what our phones are actually running at. And that kind of gets them around some of the nitpickier comments on things like the pen tile versus RGB stripe that you'll see on an LCD display.
Yeah. I'm curious to see.
Yeah.
That could be interesting. I mean, again, if LG can iterate and actually do something different, you know, that's a nice little perk in having some real competition in this space for a change.
Yeah, well, RGBW can get real bright. When they did it on their TVs, LG did it on their they started doing it on their TVs in like 2010, I want to say, maybe 2009. The big deal was how much brighter they got because you had a white subpixel that was able to just blast light. Right. And I'm curious to see, because this is going to be an LCD panel. It's not going to be AMOLED, and this might be like the brightest LCD we've ever seen because of that. So it'll be cool to see LG kind of pushing the envelope, even though in so many other ways they're having difficulty doing that. At least in one small way, they'll be able to do something really cool here.
Well, because also I think that would actually match some of the work that Samsung's been doing. It's been really interesting in the TV space, watching these companies sort of dance around different qualifications. Like Samsung is all in on OLED for phones and watches, but you know, their highest end TVs, they're using that QLED technology instead because of issues like burn-in, where you would think that would be a bigger deal on a phone screen, which has consistent UI elements that you would need to worry about them burning into the screen. It's funny, like with each different division of those companies, how they're approaching the conversation in different ways with different qualifiers, with different cons that they're trying to work out for consumers.
Everybody's trying to convince everybody that what they have is the best, regardless of what it is they have.
I can't wait until HTC releases Super LCD 100.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Right. Someone else was complaining about that too. I think Goran, using the PN Weekly hashtag, you know, why isn't HTC lowering the price of their non-OLED phones? Are manufacturing expenses in Taiwan objectively too high? I think
thought
price,
they cut down on the Taiwanese manufacturing because they would outsource to China, which would be cheaper.
Well, more than that, isn't it just like price isn't necessarily reflective of, you know, what goes into the product and the build quality of the product. Price is what the market can bear. And if HTC thinks they can sell a phone at, you know, a premium price tag, you know, I think a perfect example is the HTC One A9.
Yeah. That's not always the only problem. You got Sony who, as a result of the strength of the Japanese market, no matter what, their phones are going to be expensive. There's no such thing as a budget Sony device, and they never will be because of that.
Like what is kind of interesting is seeing them dance around their mid-tier strategy. What were the phones that they had on hand at CES?
XA2 series. Yeah.
And again, that feels anachronistic. Like that feels like a mid-ranger from 4 or 5 years ago, not what we count mid-range, like premium mid-rangers today at that kind of price tier.
Yeah, well, when you get to those levels, then you have the L series. Like there's still some stratification going on with Sony, so they have to figure that out. But
I'll still put it out there though, like, you know, their fingerprint sensor being one of the most obnoxious things to kind of work around for the North American market. But
they're fixing that. They're fixing that. They're putting it on the.
They're gonna get to it. But what I mean is, like, currently today, like, I think probably their best bang for buck is the XZ Compact, like. Because you can pick it up for under $500. It's got the Qualcomm 835. It came with Android 8. Like, that was a screamer little phone. That like was the one sort of offshoot of current Sony that seemed to at least kind of make sense in terms of price performance. But yeah, moving right along. We definitely want to get into the main sort of topic, second topic on this week's show, and that's breaking down. Android Police, you guys have been putting a lot of effort into, putting together your coverage. Pocketnow, we're also doing the same, looking at what's going to be the hottest releases come MWC. And I think we should probably lead off with Samsung. I think Samsung is going to be walking away with the most ink for products around this release. Now, do you think this is kind of a turn for Samsung, utilizing the tech press that's going to be out in Barcelona, as opposed to forcing the issue on their own press conference way far away from MWC? Do you think that this is a return to that tech community, or do you think that Samsung isn't as confident in this product being able to draw its own press coverage?
I don't know. I can't really speak with too much authority on the subject of MWC because this is my first one and I'm really excited.
Right on! Congratulations!
Yeah.
Oh, dude, no, I mean, because you've been to cover like a CES, right?
Nope. Okay. This is my first event.
Oh, okay. So, oh man, Ryne, I am so jealous. I feel all mobile-focused events are downhill from MWC. The way that MWC is organized, the way that the show is put together, the events that happen around Barcelona, not necessarily even on the show floor.
Yeah.
That thing is buttoned down tight. It is so well run. And you're going to go to an MWC, and then as soon as you cover something like IFA or CES, you're like, oh, this isn't as nice. This isn't as well. But the press rooms aren't nearly as well stocked. It's like all downhill from MWC.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Good job, dude. You went straight to the top. Look at you. I am so proud of you. But no, so we had this image. What was it, Galaxy S3 or Galaxy S4, where they were still kind of piggybacking on MWC. After that, they would just do their own events around the world, especially hitting the New York tech press. It is kind of an interesting return to see them making so much noise about this February timeframe, where they know that the tech press is going to be in Barcelona.
Yeah, I mean, there is the fact that it seems to be a little bit more iterative. I mean, you had the S6 in going into the S7 gap year, and then the S8 gave us the Infinity display, and now we're going into another little trough going in. So, anything to help out the extra, demand second year of the same design would be really appreciated at this point. And, it's with all the coverage, all the people, all the big people that are going to be covering this kind of thing. They're going to have this as their main priority for the show.
Yeah, and they're already all there, so they don't have to worry necessarily about attracting the attention. They're where the attention is. So if it's not something to be super excited about by itself, people will still talk about it because we're going to be there. I'm going to be there. You're going to be there.
Well, what has the sense been sort of like with the Android Police editorial staff and then some of your readers? It kind of feels to me that the S8 was a good recovery from the issues that Samsung faced with the Note 7. But in scrambling to recover from the Note 7, some things felt like they weren't quite ready for prime time, like the fingerprint scanner location.
I know, it's finally in the right spot, right? Well, so the leaks make it look like it is, but...
So what has been the sense here? I mean, Samsung didn't need to fix a lot from the S8 in the opinion of a lot of the tech press. Do we need them to do anything more radical? Is it okay that Samsung takes a year just to kind of clean up a few of the little design funkery?
Well, maybe. I mean, I've still, no matter how much time goes on, you will still hear people complaining about Samsung software, as we talked about earlier. And I've heard the same complaints with the S8 and the S8 Plus, is that compared to the software on the Note 8, it's just not as good. And so maybe we'll see some better software on the whatever the upcoming phone is. Camera can always be improved. Camera performance can always be improved. The Pixel 2 and 2 XL sort of dethroned the glory of the Note 8 and the S8. But if rumors are to be believed, it sounds like Samsung's going to be doing some really cool stuff with the camera on the S9 that's totally unique. So we'll see.
I mean, there's only so much that, the variable aperture that's being teased from f1.5 to 2.4. I'm not sure if it's like a truly variable or if it's just two set apertures, but I'm not sure. I can't really imagine what kind of little tricks they could pull off with that. So it's going to be interesting to see on that front. I want to talk about price because this is the sign of another like little step up towards heaven in terms of just getting the price up to $1,000.
Are you trying to lock yourself in a closet with Samsung right now? Are you hoping for your
7 minutes? I mean, well, I think
Ryan, I apologize for how bawdy this show just got. Went super blue there.
Hopefully the keynote is going to last longer than 7 minutes.
Jules giving me a case of the vapors there. I have to go.
He's going to get my office dirty.
Getting hysterical.
Sorry,
He's going to get his office dirty.
Listen.
He's in your office. We have to clean up after Jules. You do.
So 100 pounds. Do I have to walk in there again? So 100 pounds more is the word. Your thoughts? I'm not gonna.
Well, the S8 was already expensive. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. Because Ryan, because I think that goes hand in hand with the other thing that I wanted to bring up too. We've got this lobster potting effect on pricing. Again, what the market can bear, and you can't back it off because that price tag does seem to speak to people as to quality product. It's an emotional response. It costs the same as an iPhone. That must mean they're trying to make it compete against an iPhone. But do you think that price is going to go hand in hand with bifurcating the Galaxy S line for the first time, having features on the bigger S phone that won't make it to the smaller S phone, something that Samsung has historically been very good about not dividing their consumer-facing fashion handset?
Maybe. I mean, I haven't heard anything to that effect, but like an explanation that would make sense if there is more of a price difference between the two models. It could be rose-colored glasses of my youth, but I remember a time when flagship phones were $500. Now we're up around $1,000. Mm-hmm. I don't. If they're going to be 100 pounds more, what does that work out to usually when it's in the US? At least $100 more. Yeah. Like we're talking about $1,000 phone here. That's
yeah. I would expect the S9 Plus to start coming in somewhere around the price of last year's Note. So we're in that $900 plus territory. It's tricky because you don't want to have those. Like, I think any conversation in tech commentary, is it worth it? You know, the second you ask that question, I think that question is inherently toxic to the discussion of a gadget. It's more about, can you really find out who this phone is for? I have a harder time nailing the audience at a $900 price point in the United States. Especially like in my own circle of family and friends, people holding onto their phones longer, and quite a few of my family members looking mid-range and entry level. You know, my millennial sister going with Moto G series phones. And like,
well, I'm a millennial too. It's okay.
Well, yeah, like I'm right on that cusp where no one wants me. I'm not a Gen Xer. I'm not a millennial. No one wants me. My money is irrelevant. But like right on that cusp, like saying like also making that choice where she doesn't need certain bells and whistles. And if she smashes her phone, replacing the entire phone is less expensive than replacing the back glass on an iPhone.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're starting to entertain some of these conversations more publicly in the United States. And it seems to be less of a virtue signal or less of a fashion signal when you pull out your phone. Like, no one's really that impressed if you have an iPhone anymore. You know, well, iPhone 3GS, like that was a status symbol.
Yeah.
Like along with your purse and your shoes. Now it's ubiquitous. Like everyone needs to have one. It's less of a luxury item.
I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I know in the circles that we circulate within, that might be the case, that it's no longer a big deal to have an iPhone. But I know that there was a discussion about this subject on Reddit actually recently, and someone pointed out in a comment, a tag on Twitter, something about green bubbles. And I guess in popular opinion, people are actually still really into the idea of the iPhone being a superior product and a status symbol, and how if you have green bubbles in your SMS, your chat, gotta avoid that guy. So I mean,
for the record, my favorite color is green.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So,
see, but again, like that's sort of an emotional response. It's not necessarily the rational response. I guess I am not into that lifestyle where I would
Yeah.
I would be looking at the where a notification came in from. Well, that makes sense because I'm also an Android user, so we don't have a messaging platform to really speak of.
I cry every time.
No, we have 50,000
it's so sad.
of them.
I'm like every day I pour out just like a little fifth for Google Hangouts and what it could have been. So yeah, that's Samsung. I'll be curious to see if, because one of the rumors I'm most concerned about is like this will be the first Galaxy that has a different camera sensor for the smaller phone. Again, it's totally a rumor. We won't know until these things are actually here, but that makes me, for some reason, that makes me squirrely. That makes me nervous about seeing Samsung do something like that when before, like the biggest change between the S8 and the S8 Plus was just battery size and screen size. So it made sense that there was very little difference between those two handsets. I really hope that we don't see further division for Samsung hardware, especially because I think they already struggle to keep up with software demands. So if you have yet additional differences between their phones, well, it's already the joke. Isn't it already the joke that you're not going to get an update for your Samsung phone until the next phone is out?
Yeah. Not to mention there's always the Android dirty word, fragmentation. It becomes that much more difficult if you've got different SKUs. If they're all using the same hardware part, it's like, oh, well, you know, you update one, you can update both. But that's not the case if you've got two phones that use two totally different sets of hardware as well, because then it's going to be more work to update them.
And then they're locked on Verizon, so you can't even like get.
So 3 months later, you get your update to Oreo.
So one of the things that I actually think was kind of interesting, someone else posted this. I'm so sorry. I'm so bad at attribution for, you know, like when someone tweets me something and I have to go back through my chain. But someone else had a theory that one of the reasons why Samsung was entertaining doing their S9 release closer to MWC was that they were going to face significantly less competition from other players like LG.
Yeah.
Do we think LG is going to try and join this conversation with the tech press in Barcelona in any meaningful way? Like they might not have anything directly to show off. Maybe they can talk about a refresh on a V30 or a G6 or something like that. But this used to be a staple for them in doing outreach. I mean, it's not just what you put the press release out on. It's also just maintaining all of the relationships with all of the authors and editors and reviewers that are going to be on the ground there.
Yeah, I don't know. There are definitely the number of rumors about LG, the V30s or whatever it's going to be called, have been picking up as we get closer. So I definitely think that certainly sounds to me like they're going to be announcing something.
Well, I mean, the main thing is going to be that their AI effort. I mean, they're the
that's going to be the focus.
Industry. Yeah, in terms of that, because we have Google, we have Bixby, so already they're kind of stepping behind this. Now, how well they are able to build this out, we're not sure. Maybe they can have a more refined product by the end, but perhaps even the G7, maybe this summer, maybe this fall or something. But you know, just having this as a step up. I think it was a good idea to couch this the growing pains process with an iteration of a current flagship. That sounds like a pretty good thing to have a reliable test bed on. But it
does make it pretty easy for Samsung to come into MWC and steal everyone's thunder with their event, though, because now they don't need a separate one. Because HTC is not going to be doing anything. LG is going to be talking about AI. I mean.
That's their pre-show. Yeah.
Does that leave like the major player is Huawei, as we should expect some kind of traction on a P20 or P11 or whatever,
or Mate X or
yeah. Again, I mean, they'll probably call it 6 different things for every different region that they ship to. Is this an opportunity for Huawei to try and generate more buzz, or do we think that Barcelona is going to be just unholy dominated by Samsung discussion this year?
I don't know. Especially with the recent news about Huawei, I don't know. Everything that every time we cover it, every time you cover it, every time, you know, people from various outlets discuss Huawei at MWC, it's going to be tinged with the recent developments of the Senate talking about how the FBI and the CIA don't trust Huawei. So I don't know if I hope they can put a positive spin on their PR at the event, because they need it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. You know, because I think that's one of those things, like, we love building up companies and tearing them down, and then we love the comeback story. Like, all of this is high drama for us smartphone fans. Um, no, I was gonna say, but the idea that this is an opportunity for them to join the discussion. They'll have a public platform. The tech press is going to be there. We know any story about Huawei is going to come with the recent issues they've had between Best Buy and North American law enforcement. So if they can join that conversation in a meaningful fashion, that could actually be a really big step towards, you know, launching a new phone. You know, they're in the mind share right now. People are asking me about Huawei products. They see them. You know, we've seen them make little tiny inroads. You can buy an Honor at, you know, Target. The Mate 10 has had more interest, I think, than any other Huawei that I've reviewed in the past. I even showed it off on like morning news here in LA. Like, they actually let me pull a phone that wasn't an iPhone on like a morning news broadcast. So there does seem to be this broad awareness of a brand that 2 years ago just completely didn't exist. I guess it's just like, do we have faith that any kind of PR team right now in this political climate can capitalize on that awareness right now?
I think it's certainly possible. Like they say, there's no such thing as bad PR. If anything, people are just talking about Huawei now. They're talking about them with a distinctly negative connotation as a result of North American law enforcement, but they're talking about them, and it's very easy to change a conversation that's negative like that positive. I'll be interested to see if the CEO of Huawei, with his history of going off script, manages to say anything interesting at MWC.
Yeah, like he was.
Go on.
So just taking out that hate on AT&T and Verizon, I guess.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Yeah. I'm going to go against the notion here of having this be such a big, the government report be such a big deal, because they're already addressing the rest of the world. I mean, the U.S. is kind of a hard nut to crack, but they're trying to keep up the pace in Germany, UK, the markets that they're already dominating. And this is just another flagship product that will add on to that. So if anything, I think there are more important fish to fry for the moment. And they're just trying to get, I mean, what are we going to talk about? Because the P20 is not going to matter to the US anyways. They never release major P series things with a splash, at least in the US. Where they tend to go for the mates more often as part of CES.
You know, a lot of these issues are probably irrelevant to the international tech press that might be covering Huawei.
Yeah.
So,
I still wish they'd get rid of the logo under the screen. Bothers me so badly.
The peacocking, you don't like?
Put it on the back.
Like, ooh. In case you were looking at your phone and you forgot what phone you bought, you can always just look down.
Gross.
Right there. What is this?
Proud as a peacock.
Huawei. Yeah, that's what it is.
Huawei.
So, getting back to just a few of these other rumors, other companies are definitely going to be trying to make some noise. I think one of the more compelling designs I've seen would be Mi Mix 2.
Those leaks look beautiful, don't they?
Those leaks look amazing. I got into some really spiky and heated conversations on my personal channel because I was talking about how I'm not a big fan of the iPhone 10 notch. I mean, that's fine for iOS users. I'm sure you can get used to it, but I really hope to not see a bunch of copycats. And we've seen some indication that there are a few manufacturers that are looking to piggyback on the notch design, the unibrow design of the iPhone 10, and that there was that story that Google was going to be building in better support for Android to recognize those kinds of differences in hardware to adapt the UI elements around something which might intrude on the screen. If you were to do that, I think Xiaomi may have just found the best possible solution until we can hide a camera sensor under the screen.
Yeah. Or until we can just rationalize getting rid of the front-facing camera. I so infrequently use mine. I'd be fine getting a phone that doesn't have it.
Yeah, I know. Well, the thing is, like, that'll never happen because I think there's been such a consumer. Look at Oppo.
Yeah.
You know, Oppo used to try and be bleeding edge, and then they came out with like 12 different selfie camera phones.
Yeah.
And which Oppo was more successful?
Yeah, we're definitely not the target audience for this sort of stuff.
No, I have this dream that eventually a smartphone manufacturer, just like we were figuring out fingerprint sensor under the display, I'm hoping that we can figure out selfie camera under the display, because it's the biggest lie of science fiction is that you can make eye contact with whoever you're video chatting with. And you're like, maybe someday we could make that a reality and then not have anything interrupting the top of the screen instead. But until we get to that point, the Mi Mix 2 looks like a phenomenal solution, which is way less intrusive.
And they got rid of the chin. They must have switched to AMOLED to do it because they need that flexible substrate to wrap around like that. So it's gotta be AMOLED.
Oh man, you pair that with like a really hot chipset, get that 845 in there, give me some RAM and some storage,
and that MIUI. MUI,
and then let me install a new like Nova launcher on top of
it. Or you flash a ROM and you make it okay.
This is their latest Android One phone for like $7,000.
Oh, one can dream.
Oh, one can dream. I still have hopes that we'll see even more manufacturers sort of joining Android One and giving some of those solutions some attention for first world markets. I feel so many consumers are left out in the cold for even just the basics. Like,
we were just talking about Android One in our podcast yesterday. It's not really anything like what they said it'd be. It's Android One was supposed to be for emerging markets, and now it's really just the new Google Play edition. And we've got Android Go is going to replace the old Android One.
And soon enough, Android Go is going to be $1,000, and then we'll have like Android Stop.
Yeah.
Or you know, like at some point, do they even just it's Android for the poor?
Yes.
The let them eat cake edition of Android.
Oh my god.
They'll have separate OS versions based strictly off of cake names.
Right. The Android let them eat cake. No, because I mean, like, even Microsoft has recently been trying to face things like, you know, Windows Signature Edition, where you can't release this product unless you promise you're not going to fill it with a whole bunch of crap. And that's what Signature Edition means. And like, until we can get Project Fuchsia off the ground, where it would give Google more of an iron-fisted approach to managing an OS architecture. Like, there'd be way less tinkering behind the scenes available for.
Well, they could be just as draconian in terms of Google Play certification requirements and accomplish things that way. They just choose not to.
Well, but I mean, we've been seeing them move in that direction, though. Look at like, like, so look at Project Treble. You know, you had to sign on to Project Treble if you release a phone that comes preloaded with Oreo.
Yeah, and the new rule about ads, you can't have an app that monetizes on the lock screen unless that's its sole function.
And also the changes to background processes.
Yep.
You can't really run your own custom software solution for managing background resources. Now moving forward, there seems to be a little bit more there. That's all well and good, but we're still going to continue to face this talking point, like Bloomberg. So we know Android P is going to come out with a whole bunch of different updates and new software services, probably a major focus on AI, machine learning algorithms, augmented reality, blah, 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 blah. The one thing Bloomberg focused on was better support for the notch so that Android phones can copy Apple. They spent 2 minutes on TV. That was the main takeaway that they decided to focus on with the rumors coming out about Android.
Well, that's the easier idea to push, right? Ha ha, Androids are still copycats. Look at everybody that laugh at this.
It's terminal bait, as they call it in the Bloomberg ecosphere.
Right, but isn't a part of this just the fact that, like, we're always going to have this problem, this image problem, this optics problem, where a new version of Android comes out and it might see 20% adoption in the first year?
Oh, that is optimistic.
Like I was even trying to preface that. Well, I mean, isn't Nougat up to almost 30% now?
Nougat's up to
and Nougat's
30%.
not a year old.
No, it's
older than
18 months.
It's like 15 months. I mean, like what was the first Nougat shipping device? Was it the Pixel?
That was the Pixel, wasn't it? Yeah, that was the images came out in late August and the Pixels shipped in October.
Oh, okay. So no, for some reason I was pushing that even just a little. I was pushing that to like November. So no, it is like 16 months. So yeah, I was even being optimistic.
Because Oreo's only just reached the last platform distribution numbers 1.5%. It's not great. I can pull up the precise numbers.
Well, and I really do believe that we'll see slower adoption on Oreo because of some of those changes to things like Project Treble, and mandatory and certifications. This is not a good look for a platform, though. I don't see anything that corrects this course until Google kind of just walks away and says, screw it, we're going to do the Microsoft business model where we control everything. Well,
we'll see. We got to see what the long-term effects of Treble are going to be, because Treble you combine the fact that we're going to have Treble with new long-term stable kernels that are going to be out for longer than 2 years. Now we've got, what, 6? They're doing 6-year releases for LTS. So between the two, you've got Treble releases, or the Treble architecture, which makes it much easier to do updates. And you have the fact that the hardest thing about updates is getting the binaries and your kernel working on your device. You've got 6 years of support on your kernel. So it'll make delivering updates a lot easier. So in 2 or 3 years, we might see a huge upswing in terms of the rate of updates to the latest version. It could entirely solve the fragmentation problem once all devices have been switched over to Treble, because it will. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, like, so I mean, this is what we're hoping for. Absolutely.
Yeah. We won't know until it's been years from now. 2 or 3 years, we'll have a good idea, because only a few devices support Treble right now.
So here's my super cynical counterpoint to that argument, where if Google tries to exert more pressure over the Android ecosystem, again, just super low probability. I don't think this is a likely outcome, and I'm not advocating for anything like this. Just as we're getting into one of those major refreshes, like Google tries to transition over to something like Project Fuchsia, and I'm saying like 6 or 7 year time frame from where we are today. That's a huge opportunity for someone else to walk in the space and do something disruptive. Like if we ever thought that Tizen could be an actual competitor, that's exactly the wedge moment where Samsung could just say, you know what, we've got all the infrastructure we need. We've got all our own custom services. We'll roll our own, and everyone loves Bixby. Yeah. So there you go.
Bring back WebOS.
Right. Or, like I will be very disappointed if even 4 years from now, 3 years from now, we are still interacting with mobile data services in the same block face glowing rectangle touch square get app kind of way. And I'm going to take us off for just another short little tangent, but did you guys check out Intel Vaunt?
Is that the glasses?
The glasses. So with all of the data that we're collecting on things like machine learning camera algorithms and AR starting to make its presence known to consumers, the idea that I could just pop on a pair of glasses and have lasers shoot directly into my eyes to give me a heads-up display 24/7, 365 would go a long ways towards me never wanting to pull my phone out of my pocket ever again.
Yeah, you wouldn't need one at that point.
No,
right?
But
and so is it as critical? My theory is it would become less critical. My hypothesis, not my theory. My hypothesis would be it would be even less critical. It would mean even less to me what front-end graphic UI operating system I'm running on my pocketable glowing rectangle when information is organically delivered to me for most of the social interactions that I need to have.
For some of the stuff that certainly work, but you wouldn't have the app ecosystem. That's part of the problem. Is if you abandon something like Android, you've got a huge library of applications to draw upon, and that suddenly all of your consumers would no longer have access to. If Samsung switches to Tizen, if it doesn't have some kind of backwards compatibility with emulation or something with Android applications, there are going to be a lot of angry people.
Well, but if the zeitgeist of that is happening at the same time as a major shift in interacting with that data, and you have
then
to
you can do it.
Make a separate protocol for smart glasses to interact with your Facebook notifications. Like, you know, you already have to redesign the feed so that it can pop up on my eye, and I'm using like head gestures to, like, you know, like everyone develops nervous tics or Tourette's.
To some vocalized commands, or you move your hand in the air.
I mean, it's just
if that's already the change, then I think it's less dangerous for a company to go off and try and roll their own at that point.
It's just another SDK that they have to pile on top and update every so often, and they'll have to employ new teams for that. It's just, I mean, if they're going to have to make that investment, then they have to know it works in the first place.
If we can enter a transitionary period like that, I suppose the magnitude of the transition doesn't matter anymore. Yeah.
Well, that's definitely true. I do want to wrap up, just kind of get back on track to finish up some MWC rumor roundup and some of the other things. This is something that I've been noticing, like this tiny but vocally passionate little community of people that were on board ZTE and the Axon 7. What have you guys seen maybe on Android Police? Like, has there been any chatter about the upcoming rumor about a follow-up, finally, a true follow-up to the Axon 7?
Yeah, I don't remember if we reported on it. I thought I heard, I know I remembered reading something, but I think we might have decided not to cover it. They just opened their Oreo beta program for the Axon 7, right? And I thought I'd remembered, I guess maybe we'll see it, MWC. I remembered vaguely reading something about the new version, but none of the details.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more stock, the software, and as presumably they're going to carry this over to what they're doing for MWC, which is apparently the Blade V9, which was leaked in perpetuity last year because apparently they can't keep their sites from publishing things before they're due. So I
mean, again, it's a rumor that's feeling pretty credible because ZTE leaks like a sieve, but
yeah, the hardware at least is addressed, and the software they're making promises, but so far it seems we're getting close to it. And then the Axon 9, which we heard from when they were launching the Axon M in China, that was from the CEO talking about the name of the next device, which would be the Axon 9. So,
well, see, this is where I think this conversation gets kind of interesting again. 2016 was an amazing year for mid-rangers. Between the Honor 8, the OnePlus, and the Axon,
the pile of motos,
and the pile of motos, right? Exactly, especially like entry level to that mid tier. That was a really strong year for breaking up phones in that $300 to $500 price bracket and feeling like we were really getting low compromises competing up against much more expensive flagships. Now with the main players, your Apple, Samsung, breaking that $1,000 price tier, like, is this the right time for ZTE to try and rejoin the conversation? They sat out 2017. There was some disappointment that there wasn't more momentum building on the success of the Axon 7, but do they rejoin the conversation at a better time?
Yeah, maybe, especially if they don't push the price too high. Because with, as you said, with everybody pushing everything up towards $1,000, a new $500 phone could go far. Especially if it takes the OnePlus route, and you've got the same SoC that you've got in the $1,000 phones.
Right.
You've got fast storage, you've got plenty of RAM, you've got a good display, and the only thing you're sacrificing is the software experience at some level. Then people will jump on it.
Well, and I know for me, especially if they can also emulate, you know, what made the Axon 7 so interesting was that out of nowhere comes this mid-ranger phone that they delivered this amazing audio experience.
Yep, it had that
speakers and a huge amp.
The Wolfson DAC,
yeah. Like this is like been my biggest problem with LG is they objectively have a best feature. You know, there are so many like, oh well, it's your opinion if you like a Pixel camera over a Galaxy camera or vice versa. It's an objective bullet point fact that the V30 has the best headphone jack on any device. So if you care about listening to audio, this should be on your list. And the Axon 7 was right in that league. I mean, it was so close to not talk about it just feels like such a wasted opportunity. And it worries me that if Axon 9 doesn't follow in that footsteps with one feature, just one bullet point that's a true differentiator, then I think they're just going to get lost in the rest of the conversation. It's just another also ran, a Me Too product that doesn't.
Could be. I mean, the differentiator could simply be price, as we're pointing out, if it's cheap enough. Yeah. Because you've got stuff like the OnePlus 5T, which price to performance and value of the purchase, it's my favorite phone right now. My Pixel 2 XL is a better phone, objectively better phone in every way. But if I could buy 2 5Ts for the same quantity I paid for my Pixel 2 XL. The 5T is a great phone.
Well, and especially with Huawei absent largely from these markets, like we never got the follow-up Honor 8 either. Like the Honor 9 kind of made it out to a couple markets, but not with any of the same fanfare, consistency, or reliability that the Honor 8 did.
So I'm sorry, I was looking at the PN Weekly feed, and this meme from Renato just it's the picture of Juan looking depressed. Raindrops, drop tops, my face when she says she likes that much.
That's awesome. Wow. Oh, Renato, I could kiss you on the mouth. That's pretty good. Great. I'm so cranky about I'm actually not cranky about the iPhone 10 on its own. I'm cranky about Apple doing something that then other people are going to emulate just because Apple did it.
I know. Because there are companies that did the notch and didn't do it in a way like that, like the Essential phone, which I know Jules absolutely loves for no good reason.
Take it, Jules. Own it. Own that.
I mean, I really like the shape of it, but it's objectively, it's not a great phone. But the latest Oreo update does Oreo Beta 2 improves it significantally.
Well, and also, Jules, did they ever clean up the camera?
No, it's still it's crap.
It's still pretty bad.
I was about to swear even harder, but yeah.
I mean, if you've never used like the camera on the Pixel 2, it's mid-ranger. But
that's why I have right here.
Yeah, once you've used one of the really nice cameras, it's not
gotcha.
Good.
Yeah.
I think the thing that really makes me crazy, that face, that meme came out of me complaining about this setup, and like I think objectively Notch is a bad design choice. I think it interrupts the most important aspect of using a modern smartphone is the display. That's the portal through which we utilize all of this stuff, and to cut into that, you have to have a good reason. I don't think a beefier webcam, a beefier selfie camera is a good enough reason to interrupt the display that we use for everything.
And you're not really gaining anything from the extra space it provides, because all that's up there are notifications. It's not like you're watching a video, unless you choose to intentionally accept a piece of it being cut away. If you zoom in, like you're not seeing, it's going to be letterboxed.
And pillar boxed probably too. Yeah.
I mean, the best benefit that you get out of that is being able to control an alligator's face and like have it move around.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, but again, all of that, everything that Apple did with hardware, I am sure is scientifically better than replicating those processes in software. In real world usage, the consumer practicality of that, I think software will iterate faster and improve upon the current hardware experience, and it's going to look dated in another 6 months. It's going to look silly in another 6 months. Someone passed me along. Do you guys ever watch Luis Rossman's videos? He's that really cranky repair guy on the East Coast. He has a whole bunch of videos talking about how difficult it is to work with Apple on repair guides and stuff like that. He's become a huge advocate for right to repair too, because he runs a shop, like that's literally his bread and butter. But he posted this one video, and I'm gonna butcher this, and I'm also gonna have to censor it a little. So it's not exactly what he said, but it's like companies that copy Apple are looking, say you've got this businessman and he's super successful and he's up at like 4 a.m. every day, goes to bed at like 11 or midnight, takes a 20-minute break for lunch, on the pulse, in the thick of it, hustling his butt off. And every day that he gets home from work, he rubs Jell-O all over his chest while listening to Yanni. And it would be like another person saying, oh, well, to be successful, I also need to rub Jell-O all over my chest and listen to Yanni, and ignores like everything else about what made that businessman successful. It's like
it's that secret ingredient that you put into the pasta.
Right.
Sauce.
I'm not going to work 20-hour days and never take a break for lunch and sacrifice my relationship with my family. I'm just going to rub the Jell-O on my chest, and then I'll be just like that successful businessman. Copying the notch kind of feels like that.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like correlation is somehow causation, and in addition to that, I need to ignore everything else.
Everything else about what makes Apple a successful brand. I'm just going to copy their dumbest design flaw of their most expensive product, and that's what's going to push me over the edge.
Here's the thing: if you're working 20 hours a day in public, and then you do the whole Jell-O rubbing thing in public, then that would be the case here for the notch. But until then, you know, I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison that you can safely make.
I think that is actually perfectly exemplifying what it is that I think he's trying to accomplish with that terrible, grotesque metaphor. A couple other things too, some interesting news. Asus rejoining the conversation, also looking at they might have something that's a little bit more iPhone-like, and who else? Alcatel. So we might have some interesting chatter on entry-level phones too. I'm a big fan of the Idol series of phones, especially bringing things like stereo speakers to $200 phones. Could be some interesting things to check out from MWC this year too. I think, you know, in light of LG's absence, I think we're still going to have some fun things to talk about.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially with Alcatel, that they're trying to revamp their lineup this year and focus on different features as a core set that can be spread among the low tier. So like anywhere from $100 to $300. That's what they're trying to do.
And we've got the new Nokia's. What is it? The Nokia One. That little
one,
and so cute.
Little Android Go little thing right there.
I kind of want to see one of those. It looks adorable.
How much fun was that HMD announcement that they've now cracked? I think just under top 10 sales, like
4.4 million or something like that.
Yeah, didn't Nokia branded phones just like unseat most of the market in their first year of operation as a solo entity?
Brand recognition.
That label means something, man. Yeah. Like if they can iterate, I'm revisiting the Lumia 1020 for another video, and like it would be pretty killer now to build enough momentum for them to start pushing the boundaries like Nokia of old did. Like
even better if they can make their promises to unlock the bootloader and release the kernel sources for their phones, like they're required to by the GPL. That'd be cool too.
That would be cool.
That would be neat.
Yeah.
And I think that was the perfect note to go out on. Ryne, thank you so much for joining us, especially kind of sitting through some of our technical difficulties and, you know, not just running screaming, especially since Jules is currently in your home right now.
Yes.
Where can people find you, especially your personal social media? You're going to be hitting your first MWC with Android Police. Super excited to help share that. What do you want people to know? Where can people find that coverage, and what are you hoping to share with folks?
I guess they can find me at Android Police, androidpolice.com. I tweet sometimes, mostly about not really mostly obscene things.
Cool.
And just my name at Ryne Hager.
The soft linen that he tweets.
A lot of linen, a lot of leather. It's pretty much mostly it.
Linen and leather, folks. That's going to be our next podcast topic. So you'll definitely
I'll be there
to check that out.
It'll be my Etsy store coming up.
Good times. Well, and there you have it, folks. Another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where you can find Jules is at Point Jules, and I'm humbly at Some Gadget Guy. Ryne is Ryne Hager. We'll have a link down below the video where you can click on that and give him a follow. follow. I'm super jealous. His first trade show is going to be in MWC.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. Pocketnow is around the web: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. If you're speaking the Espanol for our trek to Barcelona, you'll want to check out es.pocketnow.com. Shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology and dropping reviews anywhere you can review a podcast. Once again, we want to thank this week's sponsor. Check out Google Cloud Platform, and definitely give that a look for their cloud machine learning AI capabilities. Take your business up a notch. They're helping us keep the lights on, but ultimately there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocketnow Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness, so make sure you tune back in. What can your data tell you? With Google Cloud Platform, use machine learning at scale to build better products. It predicts so your business can thrive. Learn more about Google Cloud Platform at g.co/getcloudai.